It's nice to see everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Rick Young. I'm the head of products for LTN. LTN is a global media technology services company. We've been serving big media companies, folks that are running around the floor at NAB for 14, 15 years right now at this point. And I'm joined by John Footen today. I'll let John introduce himself, and then we can set up the conversation.
All right, sounds good. So John Footen, I'm from Deloitte Consulting. We are actually the largest professional services organization in the world. The group that we're here, the group that I work with, is a group that focuses on media technology, media operations, and works with a lot of the broadcast and media clients that are involved in that.
So today's conversation, and that's what we hope to have, is a conversation. John and I candidly didn't prepare too much, so we're just going to chat about some of the issues that broadcasters are facing as they're making the transition off of traditional distribution methodologies like satellite and fiber and onto IP networks like LTNs and many others out there. And we'll just chat about sort of what that means from a technical perspective, but hopefully we can dig in a little bit deeper from a business case perspective, why somebody would think about making that transition. The folks at Deloitte, and I'll let John speak to it, are real experts in helping the biggest media brands make that transition. So what are you hearing? I guess let's just start a little bit on the tech, and then we can talk about the business case. How does that evaluation happen when you work with big networks, big media brands?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of our clients are engaged in some sort of transformation. Now that transformation may be driven by various factors. They could be driven by a mergers and acquisitions situation with two companies coming together. They both have some sort of environment that they're working with, and they need to rationalize that distribution. Or it might be a situation like the spectrum clearance that we've been doing, where we need to migrate to new IRDs and other things in various places. Whichever those situations it is, when our clients come to us, they're coming to us because they have that business problem. That is a business level problem of one sort or another. And we work with them to take that business problem and break it down into the various things that it's going to take to achieve the business goal that we were just talking about. And so oftentimes these projects begin with a business case. This is probably the most important part of the project. We work all the way end to end down to the implementation with folks like yourselves. When we get started and we're trying to sort out what to do, it is a business case exercise.
You mean they're not just looking for some cool tech and call it a day?
Often not. And in fact, if we were just waiting for the cool tech, in many cases the cool tech's been around for 5 years or more. But there hasn't been that impetus to make the changes that are needed in whatever situation. So for example, oftentimes when we're coming off of satellite, it's a situation where the spectrum clearance drove the client to make the change.
Something they couldn't control, right?
That they couldn't control.
Totally outside of their control.
Exactly. And then when that happens, there's an opportunity to transform. So is it about just coming off of satellite? Is that the goal? Often, maybe always, never. That's the goal. The goal is to achieve some new business capability, and that it might be an opportunity to put in new codecs that will be much more efficient in their operations, use whatever bandwidth they have from whatever source more effectively, provide better quality to their end viewers. But also, maybe one of the most interesting parts of every one of these business cases we do is the additional monetization options that come from going to a terrestrial IP-based distribution platform. I'd be interested from your perspective what your clients talk to you about when you get started.
So, it's interesting. We've made a few announcements recently about some networks that are making the transition. And oftentimes, the first conversation starts something like, oh my goodness, I got to get off satellite, C-band capacity. I mean, it starts there, right? I mean, because there's, and you know this, it's a little moment of panic, right?
Yes.
I got a deadline, what am I going to do?
Yes.
And we have that initial conversation. But it quickly turns and it's sort of what's happening this year, and it's gonna catch on like wildfire next year. Is just what you started to say, which is, how do I create right? The intelligence and distribution in satellite is at the edge of the network. It's at the IRD,
Yep.
and it's at the at the front end, at the control management system. When you can start putting an intelligence layer inside the network, things change. So monetization, creating unique ad profiles for specific platforms. The number of platforms keeps growing. The ability to create unique versions of channels in a network. If you want to create a new version of a channel in the satellite world, you got to spin up another air chain. You got to spin up more capacity.
Yes.
That's problematic.
Yes.
So it was really interesting, John, to hear how quickly these conversations jumped from, oh my goodness, I got to get off satellite, to now what can I do now that I'm there?
And there's something interesting in what you just said from my perspective. A lot of our clients are finding that their distribution requirements are increasing in complexity. All right, so overall command and control of the network is getting more complicated. As you said, the spinning up of additional channels, splitting off your signals for different distributions with slightly different content and things like that. In the IP, the rights situation, you might be blacking out here and doing something else there. It's incredibly complicated, and what our clients are looking for are services and service providers that can help them manage that complexity, because if you have to build, trust me, because I've done it more than once, if you have to build the software yourself to control this complexity, it's a lot to do, and it's bespoke. It's very interesting to me when you're able to find some situation when we're doing those business cases where you, instead of building it, you can bring in a service that's going to reduce that complexity.
Yeah, and the complexity comes from, and you tell me what you're seeing as well. You have to satisfy today and yesterday's world. So you need a footprint that reaches broadcast stations. If you're talking about diginet, you need a footprint that reaches MVPDs, the traditional MVPDs, which still are a huge share of the market, right? I mean, we tend to talk about OTT and digital and virtual MVPDs only, but that's not where all the eyeballs are.
That's correct.
Right, so you need to satisfy that requirement, but you also need to reach virtual MVPDs. You need to reach fast platforms. An interesting dynamic too is that many of these channels that we used to call like fast only, 2 years ago, are the same channels that are on virtual environments, virtual MVPD. It's not just the stuff on Roku, right?
Yes. One question that brings up for me is that obviously taking signals to everywhere is a challenge, and that's where satellites have the advantage. As we head towards ATSC3, are you seeing any of your clients coming to you and saying, I need help as I make this transition to ATSC3, maybe doing more low-powered TV environments? Are you seeing some additional demand into new geographic areas that you haven't before?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact number is. I think we're up to market 53, about 53 markets, not number 53, but we've done about 53 next-gen TV transitions with various markets around the country with various broadcast groups. And they're looking for ways to get more content into the market, right? Sort of in a multi-carrier, multi-channel environment. And then they're also looking for ways to customize content for specific regions now that they have this new data-enabled path to the consumer, right? It's a whole new way of thinking versus one channel that reaches the whole market, call it a day. It's a pretty exciting time for the broadcast.
And ATSC3 enables that, right? So that's, again, additional complexity, right? That adds yet another layer of things. It could be, a complication that is significant in terms of the revenue potential for that client. So it's worth solving. One of the things I'm also curious about, since this is a conversation, is
bring it on. Let me have it.
Is what are your clients asking from you for next that you don't have today? Where are they looking to that they're asking you to head towards?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of areas. Some of them aren't necessarily specific to this conversation, but I think they're all tied in. I mean, one is they're asking for the ability to build intelligence into our transport network, into our transmission network. They're asking for us to be able to customize and regionalize programming in many of the ways that you were just talking about. They're asking for better signaling enablement, profiles for specific ad triggers for specific platforms, leveraging SCUDdy 224 as a methodology to do that. That's a big one. And then the other place that we're getting tons of interest, which I think ties into sort of the point you were making about next-gen TV and some of the other platforms, is the need to customize at scale, massive tonnage, I'm talking about 5,000 events over the course of a couple years, versions of content they've already licensed, specifically sports. Sports is a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, that was what I had in mind when I was talking about the complexity. All those rights-related issues result in sports broadcasters having to create complex, interwoven scenarios for their clients. And so anything that a company can do to take that, basically those instructions, and convert it to the to the more technical 224 or whatever it is requirements is important.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, historically that intelligence was at the beginning of the network or the end of the network, and because there are so many different platforms, you really need to, and I think the other dynamic that's happening when it comes to sports licensing and rights deals is, I think over time what we're going to see is they're going to become less exclusive, right? I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about NFL level rights deals, but pretty much everything else, there's a ton of content out there where you're not going to see an entire league licensed to a specific region on only one platform, but it might be a subset of games, or it might be based on region, and that ability to control it intelligently in the network with the appropriate triggering, whether it's based on 224 or some other methodology we haven't quite figured out yet, is a real challenge.
Another thing that I think, just changing subjects a little bit, that I see as a challenge that our clients are bringing up is the sheer diversity of technology formats and standards that they need to support in their distributions. So whether it be the codec support, varying 224 payloads, things like that. Have you seen that as well?
Well, so there's the codec support. I mean, we've been pretty agnostic when it comes to codecs, and our customers demand that in that area. The other area that's been a real evolution in the last couple of years for LTN and the industry generally is the need to support different protocols. So what I'm talking about there, I mean, LTN has its own first and last mile protocol. It's been around for a dozen plus years, excellent. But we've opened up the strategy around bringing content in and out of our ecosystem, supporting RIST, supporting SRT, supporting Zixi, supporting, you name it, right? From our perspective, we want to be as open, as agnostic as we can be. We've really been that way from day one, supporting MPEG transport stream and supporting SDI from day one. Those are basic standards going back 15 years, right?
Sure.
Or more. But today it's about supporting a broad array of protocols because we believe folks need value in an ecosystem or in a network environment.
The other thing that is often discussed in this area is latency and latency-related improvements that you can get from a terrestrial network. I find that is a critical issue as we get more into the sports world, the betting,
synchronizing,
the synchronization, yeah. And I don't know if that is something that your clients have been talking about, but
I mean, from day one, day one, latency has been an issue, right? Latency is relatively easy if you don't care about reliability, but when you care about reliability and latency, that's hard.
Yes.
And that's what folks have demanded from us. And when you're sort of making the transition from satellite, which is where we started this conversation, that's sort of ante in this space. So we were ready for that. But now when you move into the wagering world and the interactivity world, and when you're talking about delivering content all the way to the consumer on whatever device you're talking about, that's the next generation of challenges. And it was actually a panel earlier today. They were talking about how much everybody hates that experience where you have your phone in your hand, you're watching a live event, and you get the update of the score, before the touchdown. I mean, there's nothing more annoying than that. I make my kids turn off their phones when we sit down to watch a game for that exact reason, or you hear your neighbor cheer 10 seconds before you do, right? That's a problem in the industry that we collectively have to face.
I joke with younger folks that they ought to go to AM radio because that's the best latency you've got.
And they ask you, what
is AM radio?
Right,
Exactly. Old man, what are you talking about?
Shut up and drive.
But yeah, no, I mean, and actually that's regardless, whether they recognize it or not, that's something that they're demanding get improved, right? Latency improvements on any type of distribution platform are critical because you want to be there, you want to get the information as fast as it's available.
How do your customers, how do your clients that you're working with make this evaluation, right? I mean, they're familiar with the technology as it works today. Latency matters, reliability matters. What process? I mean, I know it's probably an 18-month process for some of them, but what's the process they go through?
Right. Good question. So as I said at the beginning, it starts with a business plan, right, of some sort, and a business case for whatever change you're going to make. Usually, our position is let's make additional transformative changes at the same time as this change. That after that is done, your next step is to work to evaluate what vendors and technologies are appropriate for solving those cases. So we will work on detailed functional and non-functional requirements with our clients and start a vendor landscape. We'll go to companies like yours and others, and we'll talk to them about where they stand in the market today, what capabilities that they have that they can bring to bear to solve those particular problems. And then we work with our clients to do that evaluation. That is a complex calculus. It is not as simple as it may appear in the RFP document on the other side. It is a complex calculus of factors that have to be considered. And then once we do that, I think another real quick important thing is to bring in those partners as partners. That's one thing we work very strongly with our clients on, is the creation of what I keep calling, as we kick off any program, one team. Those vendors, us, the clients, engineers and people are all part of one team. We have that same business goal, and we are constantly reminding everyone of the business goals as we go through the project and deliver these things.
How much do those requirements vary from customer to customer? Because it's, looking at it from 30,000 feet, you're like, it's a network, it gets distributed but it's not, right? It's not the same.
It's not. And there are real differences from clients to clients, but there are also, one of the things that we work to do is to reduce unnecessary differences. So, and that's true on all ends of this spectrum. It's not just on the client end, but let's say on the MVPD end, there can be all kinds of unnecessary differences in MVPDs. And nobody's gaining any value.
Biting my tongue over here.
Yeah. There's no value to anyone from these differences. It just adds to that complexity that we were talking about. And so actually one thing I'm very proud of is that we work with all of these stakeholders, to use a consulting term in this situation.
It is your job.
It is, literally. So I'll just avoid synergy. No synergy will be discussed today.
We did transform, though.
We got transform in there.
We got that. So we got that going. Yeah.
So we will work with all of these companies to try to get those differences reduced. It is including our client. Our client needs to not ask of you something completely different than the other client is asking of you.
Well, from the speaking for the vendor community, we appreciate that.
It's to everyone.
Sincerely, we appreciate that.
But it's to everyone's advantage. I mean, it's actually in their own interest to reduce the complexity they're creating in the industry. This is a beautiful big show that this is my 30th year going to, but minus the two that none of us came. But it is a small industry, and these are relatively small companies in the scheme of industries in this world. And it is important that we work with care together as an industry to produce the best value for the viewers instead of losing that value in unnecessary complexity between each other.
I
should write that down.
Let's
right?
say
That sounds-
let's all collectively say amen to that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, anyway, I appreciate your time. Thanks for chatting with me. We'd love everybody to visit the LTM booth. It's behind me. Look up, you'll see the big sign. I know Deloitte has one as well.
Deloitte booth is 2214, just over there as well.
Appreciate it. Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you, everybody.